So, why do Korean archers shoot so quickly? This is a perfect lead-on from my last video, which was going through 4 traits of the top Olympic archers at the recent Tokyo Olympics. So in this video, I want to look a little bit deeper into one of the traits I mentioned, which was timing. So in terms of timing, why do Korean archers shoot so quickly? I want to start with some data. And don't worry, it's not that boring, hopefully. I looked at the recent mixed team match, the gold medal match at the Tokyo Olympics, and I timed the shot timing of each of the archers on each of the arrows. And you can see that shot timing here in this spreadsheet. So this timing here is not actually the time at full draw, it's the time from lifting the bow to the shooting happening. So it's the time, if I do it now, it's effectively from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, something like that. It's the total time of lifting the bow, drawing the bow and shooting. The reason I timed this instead of just the time at full draw is because the time at full draw is important, but it's not the full picture. It doesn't give the total amount of work that the archer is doing, and it doesn't include all the variability that might happen. Maybe every time you're at full draw, you're there for 3 seconds, but if you draw the bow in different speeds, then that's going to be a variable in the shot. So the total time gives a nice overview of everything, and then it also includes the time at full draw. So looking at this data, what can we see? I mean, the first thing that should be super obvious is the consistency of An San's timing in particular. When you look at the timing there, 5.3, 5.4, 5.3, 5.3. I think there's one that's 5.8 seconds, which is, 0.4 or 0.5 seconds more than her shortest one, but the consistency is just relentless in that timing, and that is one of the reasons why she got those 3 gold medals. That timing is incredible. Then also, if you look at Kim Jae-duk as well, his timing is really good, and you can see it's a tiny bit more variable than An San's, but again, very quick timing and very consistent. Generally, there's only 1 or 2 that are a little bit long. So when we look at the archers across the 2 teams, the main difference really is there's a tiny bit more variability on the 2 Netherlands archers compared to the 2 Korean archers. But more interestingly, there's a little bit longer shot. So the average shot timing for the Netherlands archers is longer than the average shot timing for the Korean archers. And when you look at most of the Korean archers, this is a common theme. If we show you here a video of Im Dong-yeon shooting, you can see in this video that the time from the bottom when he starts lifting the bow through to the time of shooting, very short. Same with An San, same with Kim Jae-duk, same with Kim Woo-jin, same with, I'm trying to think of all the different examples, but there's a lot of people who have very quick shot timing through the entire shot. And the key thing here is it's basically less work. That's the simple way of putting it. The quicker you shoot, the less work you're doing. The best analogy for this is if you do a press up, it's harder if you do it very slowly and control all the way down, very slow, control all the way up. That's much harder than if you do it quickly. You can kind of go through it a bit more efficiently. If you do it quickly, you use less energy and then you tire less. So in this same way, that's what's happening during the shot when the shot timing is shorter, like for An San and like for other archers as well who've got that quicker shot timing. So now let's have a look at some other things that are to do with this. Okay, so that's the basic premise. Less time, less average time on the shot is less energy. Why is that beneficial? So the first thing that should be obvious is if it's less energy over a longer day, you're going to tire less, your technique is going to be more consistent. So that's the first thing there. But what's really interesting is over a long period of time, and I'm talking years here, if you imagine your shot timing is 5 seconds versus 8 seconds, over a period of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years of training full-time as a professional archer, that shorter shot timing effectively means you can shoot more arrows in a shorter amount of time and also tire less. So those arrows are going to be more consistent and your fine control is going to be better. So if you compound that over time, you're going to have a much higher advantage. You're going to have a stronger advantage in your training regime and your periodization because you can more tightly manipulate what you're doing and you can fit more in a shorter amount of time with higher quality. So in that example, maybe An San might be able to shoot 110 arrows per hour and someone else who shoots an 8-second shot might be able to shoot 90 arrows per hour. in their normal training week. But that doesn't sound like a lot. Over time, over a few years, that's going to really add up, and especially when you consider the points of efficiency and the feeling of the shot being more consistent because you're tiring less, like I mentioned. So over time, this has a really big impact. And I'd encourage you, if you think the timings on the sheet don't look too different, or especially when you watch Ansan shoot, because she shoots in such a smooth way, and similar with other archers who do this as well. Im Dong-yun is another great example. Lee Sung-yun is another great example. It almost looks like they're shooting slowly. You try and shoot, draw up from the bottom here, come up and shoot within 5.3 seconds. You'll see how fast it actually is. So it looks very slow on the camera, but when you actually do it, super fast. And it's quite alarming how they can do that in such a short amount of time with so much control and having it look really smooth. So there's an exercise for you now. Go away and try and shoot a shot within 5 or 6 seconds, and you'll see from the bottom, from set position, how quick that actually is. Now, another benefit of this timing, and this is what I mentioned in that previous video about the 4 traits, the consistency of timing is key. So in a match, in a competition scenario, when you're scoring, the consistency of that timing is what's going to dictate the consistency of your release, how dynamic that is, the speed of that release, and then also the consistency of your grouping is really going to be benefited by a consistent timing. So that's really great. Again, moving on to the training part of things, in terms of the periodization and your training volume, one consideration when you're making a training plan, and when I make training plans for the athletes I coach as well, one consideration is always how to progress over time and how you can manipulate arrow numbers to do this. Sometimes you might be able to change poundage. Sometimes you can change how many arrows you're shooting. Sometimes you change how many arrows you're shooting per hour, something like that, the intensity. There's all these different factors you can manipulate. But if you have a consistent shot timing, that means when you alter the number of arrows you shoot, it's very easy to track your periodization, track your progress, and modify and increase the intensity. If your timing is variable, as I've had in the past, it's very hard to progress in your training because you've got 2 variables at play and you're not really constraining one of those variables. So imagine that you tend to spend longer at full draw the more tired you get, and you're going for a heavy training week where you're increasing the number of arrows you shoot. What might actually happen is, even though you're increasing the number of arrows you shoot, you're also inadvertently increasing the time that you're shooting because you're holding longer. So then you're having a double effect and you end up overtraining, and it's hard to modulate this. It's hard to track it as well because you're not really going to keep track of every single shot and how long you're spending at full draw. So this is a really clever way. If you've got that consistent timing, it allows you to manipulate your training much more closely and have a much more progressive overload with it. So say for an example, how you would do this. Maybe you're shooting 100 arrows every day in this week. Then the next week, you might want to shoot 110 arrows every day. Then the next week, you might want to shoot 120 arrows every day. And then the following week, you go back down to 100 arrows every day and slightly increase your poundage. Or maybe slightly increase the number of arrows you're shooting per hour, the intensity. Something like that is a classic way of basically increasing your overload, increasing your volume, but you can only do that if you're maintaining the time that you're shooting. So in weightlifting and bodybuilding, that kind of thing, in strength and conditioning programming, the key metric here they call time under tension. And this is the time, as it sounds like, if you've got a weight, this is the time that you're doing the entire movement. So to take a bicep curl, you've got the concentric part of the movement is when you're contracting the muscle and you're doing the work. That's the concentric. Isometric is when you're holding the weight, and then eccentric is when you're going back down. The time under tension is the total time of all those 3 parts. So in archery, that would be, the time under tension would be the total of coming up, drawing, that's the concentric, holding, that's the isometric, and then eccentric, coming down. Obviously, most of the time you don't have the eccentric, hopefully, but you can see now why I timed from that set position and not only the time at full draw, because you want the full time under tension. And again, this time under tension is a key factor that weightlifters, strength and conditioning programming coaches, this is a key factor that they manipulate when they do the programming for those weightlifting, or maybe you're doing a specific sport, that time under tension is a really key metric they use. So to ignore it in your shooting is not dangerous, but it's something that's overlooked a lot. And if you can constrain that down to a really consistent timing, you can get huge benefits. And now I want to address something that you're probably thinking when you're watching this, which is, okay, that's all well and good saying about consistent timing, but a couple of objections I normally have is when I shoot with a consistent timing, it doesn't feel like I'm in control, or I don't have enough time to aim, or it feels like I'm just kind of shooting the arrows down and throwing them down without any proper technique. These are all kind of valid and all also irrelevant. And the reason for this is, and don't worry, I've been exactly the same place before, been really stubborn with timing and said, oh, it doesn't feel like I'm aiming enough, that kind of thing. The key thing with timing is your technique might not feel as good when you're working on your timing. Your grouping might not be as good when you're working on your timing. It's a skill. You have to learn and improve that skill like anything else. And that's the key thing. So you can have specific times in your training where you're working on your timing and you say to yourself, okay, it doesn't matter if my grouping's not quite as good. I'm working on my timing here. This is the key skill that I'm doing. And I've seen this across key teams where they're working on this. When I've trained across the world in different squads and I've seen different national teams train, the best national teams have set times in their weekly schedule where there's a real focus on timing with nothing else as the focus. So they have drills where they're shooting 20 seconds per arrow, or they're using a metronome to shoot, or they're counting the amount of time they're at full draw and then shooting, or they're doing rhythm shooting in another way, alternating between the two archers. There needs to be some implementation of this in your training program, even if it feels like your technique is a bit wobbly, you're not aiming as much. That's the point, because what it will do is teach you how to shoot with quick timing, and then also over time your body will learn how to aim with that. If you do the other way, you'll never get it, basically. So I'd really, really encourage you to look at that. So before I get to the next bit of the video, I just wanted to briefly mention my online courses. Head over to courses.onlinearcheryacademy.com to check them out. There's detailed step-by-step courses for beginners and advanced archers. So if you're watching these videos, you like my content, but you're not quite sure how to progress and you need everything laid out in a step-by-step fashion, guided through it, I'd strongly encourage you to check those out. I've been loving the testimonials I've been getting from archers taking the courses. Feedback has been incredible. So I'm really grateful for those of you that have taken the courses, and I hope you enjoy them too. Now back to the video. So before I finish up with the video, I want to mention something that is often an indirect cause of this timing. So a lot of the time, especially a lot of the Korean archers, they deliberately work on this timing, but because of the number of arrows that you need to shoot to become really good, and because of the amount of time that Korean archers have to do this, i.e. they have to get good very quickly, and there's often a lot of pressure and a lot of time that they spend dedicating to shooting, because they shoot so many arrows in a short amount of time, it's almost imperative that they have quick shot timing, because otherwise it would be impossible to shoot that number of arrows that quickly, and also it would be impossible not to get injured probably. If they spent a long time at full draw, like a lot of Western archers do, they would probably end up getting injured, because the long time at full draw increases that time under tension, and also when you're holding for a long period of time, you're not moving. So when you come in through here and you expand nicely and you move through quickly, your scapula is moving around to your spine and you're shooting really nice and quick. Everything's moving nicely. If you stop and you're not moving anymore, very often what happens is it feels like you're just holding still, but the shoulder starts coming up. You start getting compression in the shoulder joint and you're not moving to the spine with the scapula. And what that means is effectively over a number of arrows over a long period of time, that's going to cause injury. And this is why it's so important to have the good timing and have that nice movement, even if it feels like you're not aiming quite as well or your shot feels more wobbly, because over time you're going to save yourself an injury basically, and you're going to be much more efficient in your shooting. So this is kind of like evolution in a way for archery, in terms of evolution by natural selection. Over time, the archers that maybe had a longer shot timing and weren't as consistent, they get weeded out through maybe injury or not able to progress in terms of technique as quickly. And this is the selection that happens, and this is why you see very often, not always, but very often at the Olympics, particularly with the top Korean archers, the timing is so consistent and very quick as well. So those are the key 2 metrics there. So that was a video on timing. I hope you found that useful. As always, be sure to tap the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.